Morning everyone, we return. I can't stop eating pizza. I had pizza again last night, and whenever I eat that, I don't know why, this never used to be the case, but I wake up feeling really crappy the next day. Anyway, good morning everyone, it's about 10 AM. We're getting started with some Sparkfly Fen stuff here. Now, just a quick disclaimer, obviously all the episodes in this playlist have been sped up a bit. This episode was a bit of a nightmare as far as TechZoom gathering the footage, of which I'm eternally thankful. But so, to avoid frame drops and stuff, I've actually sped this up a bit more. So if you're trying to play along, this one's going to be a bit fast. It shouldn't be so fast that, you know, it's disorienting to watch or anything. But this is a little bit quicker than the other episodes in the playlist, just so that all the frame drops don't look so, you know, intrusive. And the other thing is, we're actually going to be cutting between two different mesmers here that TechZoom played. There was some kind of big issue on the initial clear. So we're flipping back and forth, but that's cool because, you know, we're a mesmer and we're deceptive, and maybe we were the alternate mesmer the whole time and it's just a big illusion. So here we are at the Termites, which I mentioned several parts ago in the playlist when we were in Brisbane. Dealing with the Termites this time involves like a really complicated mechanic to do with these hylek ice shooters, where you fire them at the ground, then you pull the like wriggling termites away, then you throw them, then you kill them, take their meat and throw their meat onto the fire. I really like this kind of heart, for what it's worth. It's a lot like the one in Ascalon, where you fire the cannons at the wall and the wall breaks, and then you throw the parts into the water. Really good format. I think ArenaNet could have done a lot more with this. Particularly just that idea of going through a sequence of stuff to get a hold of some rubble or some meat or something that you then throw somewhere, instead of just collecting UI items that you deliver to the heart vendor. I think it's brilliant. And again, unfortunately, this heart ends a bit quick, right? As I always start to enjoy it, ends a bit quick. There is obviously the alternative of just killing general things around, and you'll be fine with that as well. So we're starting here at the northwest corner of Sparkfly. There are, in theory, two entrances. This kind of is a little bit more of the quieter section of the map. I don't often start from up here. This is the cave I mentioned in Timberline that we would be going to. Timberline has a cave at the end of a bit of a tunnel that has a hero challenge at the end. Similar thing here. Here we have a veteran hylek chief. Now, the hylek are some of the most deadly enemies in the game. I've talked about some of the big threats for the open world. Hylek are one of the big threats, particularly because of their blowgun attack. Now, this guy can be very scary. They also have that little bit of a jump evade thing. But even in the early game, if you're doing an armorless challenge or something like that, you want to watch out for these. And the risen ones in particular. Now, only Sylvari have to deal with risen hylek from a very early level. But they're an actual threat. Like, of all the things that Zhaitan corrupts, those are the ones you want to watch out for. Okay, so this little jumping puzzle area here. This place is fantastic. The Sparkfly Fen, we are once again today in a convention map. But this one was released at a convention like quite a bit after the whole Gamescom, Gendaran Fields, Blazeridge Steps stuff. It feels kind of late in the day. And here we got to see another one of the big dragons. I guess they realized that people really loved seeing the Shatterer fight in the Gamescom original demo. And by the way, these things were copied over for PAX as well, which is in ArenaNet's backyard, and is classically during the Guild Wars 1 days apparently the bigger convention. But anyway, so eventually we did get this as a demo. By the time that this came out, the game was looking a lot more like Guild Wars 2 as we know it today. The energy potion mechanic had gone away, and we were on a more endurance-based thing. Though I think the user interface had it in a different place. It wasn't cradling the health bar, it was to the right where our boons and buffs are. But traits had started becoming really normalized, more of the classes were available. And the thing is, on this map, there is another big dragon fight. This one's against Quarter of the Sunless. So they talked a lot about that. But the map itself is now feeling a lot more like regular Guild Wars 2. The one thing that I really liked, though, is that jumping puzzle area that we were just at, that hidden little cave. One of the most special cool videos that came out was a guy that found that area and explored it. And it felt so intimate and detailed, while everyone else was kind of just out in the open fields and experiencing generic stuff and dealing with the Tequatl fight. Someone did come here, and there is a whole event that has a tower. Right here, there's an escort event where you bring some people to destroy an old, I think it is meant to be an Orion Tower. So we're far enough south now that you're starting to feel the real influence of the Orions. and maybe some Orions, you know, crossed the waters surrounding their lands and really extended kind of far north, and some of their most outer reach fortifications and stuff you can find. And anyway, so there's a tower here which is now horribly haunted by an undead lich, and I think he has like an Orrian name, a proper like Arabic, beautiful sounding, cool, complicated name. And so obviously that's fascinating for any kind of lore nerd, that there was this weird jumping puzzle place that led to the top of a tower with a lich that you got to fight. And I know I've kind of complained that most of the varieties of Risen are higgledy-piggledy and just mashed everywhere together and there's not a good sense of progression. But Risen liches, you don't find too many of them in the early game. So, and especially way back when, before the game came out, that was something really, really special to find. But here, look, under the water here as well, we find an Orion tomb. I'm not quite sure what the devs are suggesting on this one, but there are a lot of flooded places around Or that there's lots of water around, and you kind of, I mean, that's more of a conversation for one of the next maps, the Straits of Devastation, when we get to Or itself, but maybe it's related to the now fallen god of water, Abaddon, whose temple is also sunken. But anyway, you get to see their tombs now. It's all getting a hell of a lot more interesting. As for this general area of the world, as we kill these Risen pirates and get a little bit closer to the south, I guess we go straight down the flank here. As for this general area of the world, it's a place where you'll find a lot of hylek, and particularly people who are struggling to survive against the onset of new waves of Risen that are pushing out. And I talked about this a little bit of Bloodtide Coast, which is to the north. They kind of jumped the gun a bit early with Bloodtide, because already it's like all the Risen have pushed through and attacked here. But that is really the main story again, right here at Sparkfly, and it feels a lot more natural in this region of the world. It works very well for me. You've got some cool Vigil stuff going on. There's a really big, beautiful fort with many different levels and areas to explore that only later, when guild puzzles got added, did there really get any great incentive for players to deal with. In terms of reasons for players to come here, there's actually loads. There's a brilliant world boss to Quarter the Sunless. There's a variety of guild stuff, including on this one is one of the special ones for the bounty, where you've got to like look in the trees. A bunch of these trees are interactable and you've got to like knock a guy out. There's a jumping puzzle that you can occasionally come to for daily. One of the easiest treks in the game for guild stuff is actually here as well. And there is a unique weapon set and unique crafting currency on this map. Now you might immediately think, oh, that's going to be tied to the world boss, no? But no, it's to do with the hylek. There is like a sun bead currency in the game that you can get all these recipes that will give you beaded weapons. And it's a fun little distraction, fun extra thing to do. I think in a perfect world, all 25 maps would have some kind of special crafting thing that you can engage with. Obviously, that's a tall order. They got it in here, which is great. And going back to the meta event, this isn't any old world boss that, you know, you could take it or leave it, like Tyler Covington or something. This world boss in particular had a big revamp. So, I talked about the Triple Trouble Worm a lot in Bloodtide Coast. The big, epic, like, raid-style, 150-man challenging content that preceded that patch was a patch called Tequatl Rising. So here's the story. When Guild Wars 2 came out, Tequatl the Sunless is added. From the convention demos, it looks like it's well balanced and so on. Turns out, the RPG is very complicated, hasn't been playtested in certain ways, and this fight is actually really lame and really boring. So when Season 1 came out, the devs found an excuse to return us to that area of the world, and they basically say the fallout of the events of the personal story has supercharged this boss, and now he's been revamped, and they added all these amazing new elements to it. As much as I played Triple Trouble, more than I played, you know, I went really hard on both of them, but Triple Trouble definitely eclipsed this patch where they revamped this world boss. As much as that's true, I actually think this is one of the best patches that they ever added. I actually think it's of a higher quality than the Triple Trouble one. Maybe. I mean, it's close, but it's really good, guys. They added like a huge tidal wave that can destroy the Zerg. They added all these defense events that were gruelingly difficult. The cannons in the back of the fight, you have to properly defend, to play with a mechanic to keep the boss vulnerable. There's the bone wall mechanic. There's all kinds of hazards and extra spawning enemies that you've got to deal with, like Risen Abominations and Tendrils. It's fantastic. It had its problems, unlike with Triple Trouble, which split people into 3 50-man Zergs. It's all 150 people all together, so you get all kinds of horrendous latency and FPS issues. But it's fantastic. It really was. And to learn it when it came out was so exciting. Back when you would sort of split into 2 mini Zergs that were nonetheless right next to each other. Nowadays, though, there's been lots of power creep. The devs made the boss vulnerable to conditions at one point and made him way easier. Then they straight up doubled his health along with all the other world bosses in the game, and that still wasn't enough to bring him into check so he was easier. Then they had changed the crit scaling with a ferocity update later, and it made bosses in lower level maps even easier to kill. This guy, even though we're getting up there in the levels now, this guy still, unfortunately, suffered a lot. I mean, we're like level 64, maybe 65 down at that actual place. So he became easier with that. And then there's just like general profession power creep and balance stuff, which means that unfortunately the boss nowadays is a joke and very easy to kill. You never really see it fail. You have to really try to make it fail. In my series of the personal story where I was running through trying to show all this stuff, to get the tidal wave to spawn was a nightmare. Like, really hard. I had to get a whole Zerg that were committed to not participating in the fight. Like, I had to get like 70 to 80 of you viewers in there and guildies, members of Spud, which, by the way, anyone could join, I'll remind you guys. But we all came here and just, and we couldn't do it. Other players managed to, like, do the fight anyway, even though we'd scaled it up that much. And it's kind of dodgy when you're doing things like that, because you really shouldn't be scaling stuff up and causing them to, so to speak, fail and stuff. I mean, we were still going to beat the boss. We just wanted to see the one mechanic. It's really, that's how power crept everything is now. And so this boss, unfortunately, was in a beautiful state at one point. Truly beautiful. And now it's not. You can see they made it a guild poppable event. One thing I really want for Guild Wars 2 is to make it so that if you pop it as a guild, which is what we did, and we still failed the tidal wave because people found it and ran over, by the way. I kind of want it so that if you pop things as a guild, maybe you can do like a harder version of them or something, designed not for 150 people, maybe designed for like 25 or something. I don't know. The thing is that what I'm talking about is adding even more formats to the game, which is not right. So I don't know. I mean, I get why they moved away from it and went for formal raids. I guess I'm just nostalgic about a patch I really enjoyed, and nothing really needs to change. Anyway, this is where the fight is taken part in. Yeah, there's a giant laser mechanic. Of course, there's a heart here, a lot like with God's Lost Swamp. This heart is not as long as the God's Lost Swamp one, though. I guess by this point they realized that wasn't really necessary or something. We're killing things with one of the environmental objects that they actually offer at the Asura base, which is pretty funny. But yeah, even though this has been power, you know, diminished, you know, we've been power crept, this isn't hard anymore, it's still a special world boss because when they did the revamp, they added a ton of rewards, like a special mini pet that can come from this. There's lots of legendary collection rewards that are tied to this, and frankly, you get a ton of karma. Oh, there's a unique weapon set here as well, and it's very, very, very rare to drop, and to get the full thing would be very difficult. And you get tons of karma, so realistically, there are a huge amount of active Guild Wars 2 players who every single day, when the daily reset happens or around about then, they'll go for the Tequatl of the day. They'll come home from work, they'll boot up Guild Wars, and they'll be doing Tequatl. They'll be here. So Sparkfly, just for that. I mean, there's no guild puzzle entrance here, for example. There's no guild challenge here. Just for that, this has become a very, very, very well-populated map. Even more so than the sort of less hearted, shall we say. I mean, they did a lot of work with it, but the Shattery work that they did. There's a third dragon as well. We haven't done a video on it. It will appear in one of the later playlists, who has not had an update, even though we're kind of in a Living World saga at the moment that could do it. I guess we'll see. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of the big beach. There's lots of waters immediately to the south that, in theory, you could swim straight over to Orb, but fierce currents will push you back. I remember spending so much time here, guys, and so many different things. Even just with the original convention, the actual spawn animation of the boss bursting out of the water. Oh yeah, there's a whole super deep water mechanic as well, where you can get sucked under the currents and stuff. But which used to be really intimidating. The animation of him bursting out of the water actually made it into one of the trailers too, right around when this map released as one of the convention demos. So that's quite nice, and I remember always looking at it. It's another one of those things that we were talking about in Timberline, though, where he's supposed to burst out of the water and, like, crash into this massive old Orrian fort ruins that are nearby. So he looks really big, because he completely dwarfs this fort that he's standing on. But the truth is, the fort is tiny. And in fact, nowadays with mounts, you can just climb up there, and when he spawns, he'll, like, stand right next to you. But yeah, they're just sort of doing a bit of a trick there. So, I actually am quite surprised. It's funny, doing this playlist, We haven't seen many Sylvari, it feels like. We really, it's weird because I never sort of felt like there was that was missing. But yes, finally here we can find Sylvari on their wild hunts and, you know, following their compulsion, joined with the pack perhaps, to fight against the Risen, far away from their home at Caledon Forest. And we can see Carebriar here, where you can help them out. There's actually a lot of little hearts that you can do all around this swamp area and have fun with. Let's talk a bit about Guild Wars 1 right now, because we kind of just crossed the boundary back into Guild Wars 1. So, in theory, before I show you the map, in theory, this area of the world is a really weird remote place that there's no Guild Wars 1 content at all. Same as with Bloodtide, I said before. We're kind of just out in the waters here, right? Most of this map should just be like the Sea of Sorrows. But it is true that when Eye of the North came out, the expansion for the first game, they kind of plopped a random map in this area of the world that this is called Sparkfly Fen in Guild Wars 2. It was called Sparkfly Swamp in Guild Wars 1. And there was one remote map here on the coast next to the mountain that you could access via a surrogate and traveling through the depths. And so because of that, getting dropped in there in Eye of the North, we do still find ourselves overlapping. So here's the map, and you'll see that a good chunk, this whole bottom, southeasterly corner, is overlapping with the original Sparkfly Swamp, which, while it looks smaller, I actually think the two maps feel equivalent in size at this point. But yeah, so there's two landmarks that Shaman's marked off anyway. First is the entrance to a dungeon, the Bogroot Growths. The other is Seiges Ashes. So to talk a bit about Bogroot Growths, for core Guild Wars 2, they often didn't really show off the dungeon entrances that well. So there is a cave up there in Guild Wars 2, and we'll be visiting that cave very soon in the footage. But there's no like sense that you can go really deep down into the depths of Tyria, or that there's any vast complex beneath you. There's not much of a hint at all. There is one very special dungeon where they did do that, but not here. And in fact, in the recent patches for the Icebrood Saga, they've been really good at showing off those old dungeons and even letting you explore. So, yeah, they've done well in more recent years, but this is 2012 stuff, not 2020 stuff. And then the other thing is Seiges Ashes, which there is actually like a little tomb area at on Sparkfly of 250 years later. So, if you don't know who Sidra was, in the original story, the Shining Blade was led by 3 people. There was a man named Marcus, and there were 2 women, Avinia and Sidra. By the time the story's done, however, only Avinia survives as the sole leader of the Shining Blade, and then 250 years pass and so on. And even Avinia has a bit of a mystery as to what ended up happening with her. But so 2 of the other leaders died. The first was Marcus, who betrayed us basically, so he was no longer a leader. And then we actually kill him. We avenge everyone that he betrayed, and we kill him. So that was his fate. But just before we kill Marcus, Sidra essentially sacrifices herself to save the hero of Guild Wars 1. So Sidra's like this big character, this noble, honourable leader of the Shining Blade that unfortunately does not survive the Prophecies storyline. That was in Prophecies. Then later, in Eye of the North, several years later, we're kind of near the Shiver Peaks right now, and we're kind of near where Sidra died, if we were able to actually get to the Shiver Peaks from here, which we can't. There is no portal, by the way, in Guild Wars 1, where this was kind of disconnected, but we're sort of close. So, in the Sparkfly Swamp, you can find this little place with Seiges Ashes, and it's a little nod back to what was going to be quite an important character, but she's kind of cut short early. Look at this amazing hole in the water here, by the way. Again, this reminds me, this feels so similar to something we'll find in an upcoming video when we go back to the Shiver Peaks at Frostgorge Sound. There's kind of a similar thing here. But I love the look of those roots dangling down in the pool. So yeah, they did a little nod to it in Eye of the North, and even here in Guild Wars 2, check it out. We're basically at the place. This thing here, the Shrine of Ushar, this Orion tomb place, this is where we found her ashes. And I'm not sure, maybe that hero challenge refers to it? I didn't see when we grabbed it a second ago. Maybe you guys can go back and pause. I appreciate it will be a little bit tricky considering how fast the footage is going here. And I'm trying to speak faster than I'm actually capable, so. Alright, now we are at a very cool place. This is the center of the map, and you'll see that we're in the middle of a meta protecting the Zintal Holy Ground. So this is, I always get the sense, I don't remember the devs ever making a comment about this, but do you remember how Brisbane Wildlands had Mount Nashington, and within it was Skritsburg. We find Skrit all over the world, but it feels like they have like their city, their place in Mount Nashington, like a big iconic location that they all live at, right? They live in many other areas, but that's a big thing for them. I kind of feel like the devs wanted something similar for some of the other lesser races, and when it came to the hylek, this is what they went with. The Zintal Holy Grounds is really big, temple complex. Just like with Skritsburg, there are various meta events to keep it safe and defend the doorways and so on. It's actually surrounded on all corners with hearts to do with the hylek, just as the Skritsburg area had multiple hearts. And in particular, once you get inside, it's not got the services of a full city, like a bank and trading post and the important ones, but it does have crafting stations, which double up as banks. And back when we used to do Tequato, when it was really hard and you could get in the map, you could come up here to utilize these banks and swap stuff around, but there was never any trading post here. A lot of great dialogue, though. The central heart has got this really cool, like, spiral staircase that you can worm all the way up. They, hylek here, talk in particular about losing their homes and some great stuff that I really enjoyed splicing into the main personal story playthrough that I did. And yeah, so the crafting here, this is where kind of the beads come in, the unique bead material. There's something else unique here as well that's a little bit like the growth tonic that we were talking about if you saw in a previous episode in this playlist. And there's another cosmetic tonic available here. Each of these hearts in the area can sell to you some like hues, some dyes, which if you double click them, it will make your whole character a certain shade. So you know how like when you get poisoned, your whole character becomes kind of like green looking-ish? Well, it's that, but you can choose to opt into it without taking any damage or anything. And there'll be various colors. I think blue was a color, orange is a color, maybe green was a color. I think there were 3 colors here. And then hidden almost in another area of the map at the end of a dynamic event, you could actually find red as a color as well. Now you'll remember that earlier in the game we had heard that the color that the hylek themselves have kind of will tell you their disposition, and the red ones are angry with you and won't like you. So I always really liked the detail where ArenaNet put the red hue in a less accessible place at the end of an event where you have to fight hylek, because it's the red one, it's the dangerous one, it's the one that these hylek will not necessarily cooperate with you. But that also made it the coolest. And yeah, you could combo stuff together using those hues. Even to this day, well, not so much with the toy system, I think there's good replacements now, but you could use like a tonic that turns you into a giant Etin, or way later you could use tonics that turn you into big snowballs from Winter's Day or whatever, and then trigger a hylek hue, and suddenly the snowball is colored, or the snow, or whatever tonic you've picked. So now you've actually got a weird way of like dyeing tonics, and that was really special because tonics are obviously kind of hard baked in what they provide to you. So yeah, that was just very fun, and even more fun way back earlier at launch where people didn't know the true existence of a lot of this stuff. More videos and guides. I think I did one big guide on all these kinds of items, including the growth tonic and the harpy pheromones and stuff from back then. It's weird as well because when expansions have come out, you might expect there's like a new wave of those kinds of experiences, but not so much now. I think the game is much more careful and refined in how it delivers cosmetics to you and stuff like that. Maybe leans a little bit more in the gem store now as well, maybe, with certain things. So yeah. Moving north now, there's still quite a lot of really good things to see. We just need to deal with a little bit more of the hylek stuff. I can't wait for you guys to see the forts, and I can't wait for, and maybe even if the Ash Horizon meta event's up, that's going to be really nice to see. And we even have a really peculiar area of the map to take a look at on the northeastern corner with some old ruins, which again I assume are like Orrian ruins. Not entirely sure. These hearts are weird because depending on how the meta goes, they can be very easy. Like if they're attacking that gate over there, you can just stand at the gate and cleave them all down. It's a shame because those flame turrets and stuff aren't really necessary, but they have it. Oh yeah, and a very easy thing to do with these as well is just activate the torches in the area. You do want to make sure that each time you do one of these hearts, you walk over towards the vendor, because I think that's where they put the point of interest for the camp itself. I guess each of the camps feels a little bit close together, but not much can be done. So here we go, Fort Cadence. A big facility up here in the north. And you see this, there's all this siege arrayed, and these walls arrayed out looking at the water. That's because as much work has now gone into the Quattle meta, there's still another really good one right here, where there's many events to deal with the Risen that sail up, I suppose is the idea, through all these waters. Because this body of water here will connect to the Orrian shores. It really will. And so I guess the idea is they sail up with their undead ship and they start assaulting this bay. So the undead ship, the bone ships, if you're a regular Guild Wars 2 player and you're doing the personal story particularly as you go along, you've actually seen a lot of those already. You know, particularly to do with the Claw Island arc and so on. So they're not new or novel. However, if you're a player that doesn't do the personal story, and if you're a player you're not even a player yet because the game's not out yet, and they're showing off a convention, this is the first bone ship you ever see. So that was what this was for me, and the spectacle of it is incredible. So I guess the devs didn't actually have or weren't willing to commit to the idea of the boat fully sailing through the map. So what they actually do instead is like a Pirates of the Caribbean, Black Pearl style thing, or Flying Dutchman style thing, I should actually say, where these ships burst out from underwater. They're like subs. They're sneaky-ass subs, and then they burst up. So you get all this spectacle of it erupting out. The event starts. You defend it. The meta never actually comes inside the fort here. That was an amazing portal. What a cool portal that was. So there's a whole interior there. There's a guild trek in there. It's really dark, really ambient. You find ghost pirates there again, which is nice considering they're right on the doorstep of these Risen. Super fun. Hero challenge down there. Exploring in that was brilliant. And the meta event as well was truly, truly fantastic. I love that whole thing about the bone ships being underwater. It's funny. Last night, I was actually reading a lot about... This is going to sound weird, but mutually assured destruction and how the UK, and I'm sure many other countries, but we have all these nuclear submarines, right, loaded with missiles. But the way it works is that it's really hard to find out where a sub is because water has all these properties that help to conceal you so well. And they're just always on patrol, so no one knows exactly where they are. So if someone wanted to, you know, launch a ton of missiles at the UK and try to destroy it, they can't stop a retaliatory strike because these subs could be anywhere. And so, you know, it's protection in creating uncertainty and ignorance. And I find all that stuff really interesting. You know, Game of Thrones was quite interesting to me just in as much as it took like a medieval setting and it said, hey, look, a dragon is kind of like having an air force in a world where no one has an air force. So how do people resist against that? I like the idea of a fantasy setting doing a similar thing, but... you know, finding an analog for this whole, like, secretive nuclear sub thing that we have going on in real life. That'll be kind of interesting to me. Anyway, yeah, so over here as well. Look at this beautiful, crazy ruin area. It's so big, and the bridge is here. As far as I remember, there's nothing that really explains why all of that stuff is laid out where it is. I remember when I very first came to this area of the map, I thought that was a jumping puzzle. I really did. And here's the red hylek, and the event's been done. If he'd spoken to that vendor there as we ran past it, we totally could have got ourselves some red hue. I like that item so much that if this was me playing here, I wouldn't be able to resist. I would have totally gone for that. But yeah, there's nothing really explains why those ruins are there, why they're spread out like that. It's weird to think that that's just slightly too north of where we could visit in Guild Wars 1. And therefore, you know, we never got to see it there. But in theory, they were there. In theory, you know, it's more like probably going to be the Zhaitan runestone thing. But hey. Also, that cave that we just dipped into and unfogged for a very brief moment, that is the Bog Roots Growth entrance, in theory. But if you walk in there, you'll find it's a very shallow cave without much happening. Okay, so here we're amongst Nightmare Court again. I guess the devs felt that if they were going to have, you know, regular Sylvari around, Nightmare Court could be here too. Not sure why they'd be all the way over here. But this is actually really, really fascinating, amazing place for the lore. The Nightmare Court here are accompanied by wolves. You know how there's Sylvan Hounds? Well, the Nightmare Court often have their own hounds with them, but the ones that are in this specific cave, nowhere else in the entire game, not in Heart of Thorns, not anywhere else in Corteria, only in this cave, you can find accompanying the Nightmare Court hounds that are called Thorn Wolves. Thorn Wolves. Now, the word Thorn Wolf does exist in Guild Wars 1. There are Thorn Wolves accompanying the wardens, the corrupted wardens that you encounter in Urgos' Warren. So that is one of the other sneaky little suggestions that maybe the Sylvari are somehow connected to the Echo-Vowed Forest in Cantha. And so, yeah, they never name them Thorn Wolves anywhere else. I've always wondered whether earlier in development, they wanted that connection to be more transparent or something, and there were lots of thorn wolves everywhere. But then the devs thought, no, let's not do that. So they renamed or deleted them all. But they forgot about that place, because that is a really weird area with just a small group of Nightmare Court. I can imagine if you're like, okay, where are I'm going to canvas all the Nightmare Court and get rid of all the Thorn Wolves. Well, yeah, I'll do the dungeon, and I'll look at Caledon Forest, and I'll look at Brisbane, and here, and here, and here. And completely forget that very far away, near the Shiver Peaks, near Orr, is one cave filled with Nightmare Court. And whoopsie, the Thorn Wolves still appear there in the Dire Sight Caverns. So that's my little headcanon for it. The devs have obviously never confirmed or denied anything like that. But with the Canthan expansion ready to come out, I don't like mentioning that in this playlist, because I like the idea that people will watch this playlist at any year, at any time, and it will be timeless. And I keep, like, you know, mentioning the current events of the day, which sort of root it in a specific period. But hey, I'm excited about it, guys. I'm excited. So yeah, with that done, we have very little left now. Another heart to do with helping out the hylek, dealing with just hordes of Risen. And get ready for this, guys. When we go to Mount Maelstrom, there's going to be lots of Risen. All 3 Orion maps, yeah, guess what? Lots of Risen. We'll have a little bit of a break, though, for the final Char map and the final Shiver Peaks map. Not counting Mount Maelstrom. I don't know what you guys really consider. I consider Mount Maelstrom to not feel like the Shiver Peaks anymore. Especially since in-engine, it's tied to the Tarnished Coast and so on. As we've said before. Looks like we actually still have a heart to do. Now, this is going to be in the very southern areas, near the entrance to the Straits of Devastation. They added these launch pads after release. You have to play Heart of Thorns to be able to access those, because they're a part of the gliding chain. But you don't need to glide to survive, as you can see. So, very occasionally, they'll be worth something. It's actually kind of interesting. That's the first time we've used one of those on the playlist. Coincidentally, it's on the map where the very first jump pads ever were added. And that was with the boss battle against Tigor. So yeah, we've got an Asura Lab down there. It looks like, in truth, we actually already had that POI on this character, but we walked over. You can see how that works. That lab is actually the jumping puzzle for this map as well. It's one of the Asura Lab ones. It's weird because that jumping puzzle takes only seconds to do if the daily's up, because everyone else does all the puzzly stuff and opens the door. The idea is there's a force field, and you've got to find all these hidden switches, trigger the switches, and the door will open. So it takes seconds to do. But I remember when I did my video on that, in the jumping puzzle playlist, you'll see it takes us ages to get through that one. Because when you do it all on your own, it's much more challenging, and at launch, no one was there. There wasn't a daily incentive for it, and, you know, maybe a lot of people hadn't even found it yet. So, I mean, that's kind of cool. That you guys might think that's a shame to go to a place in an MMO and there's not other people there. But just imagine no one's there and then finally someone arrives. And, you know, you're struggling. You would really make a friend at that point, because you'd be like, okay, here's the situation. X, Y, and Z's happened. We're trying to look for A, B, and C. Good luck. And then, you know, you kind of create this collaboration. I think that the jumping puzzles really do that in a very well, get people to talk to each other. So I guess this heart has been a little bit of a pain to do. I can't remember the main technique that I've always gone for with this. But by the way, you see the swamp here? You see sort of the shallow waters and the mossy stuff and, you know, the little lily pads and just general watery things. These are actually some of the most beautiful things in vanilla Guild Wars 2, in my opinion. Especially if you get some good reshades presets going on. There's a lot of detail on them. If you proper zoom the camera in, you can see them like swaying gently on the surface of the water. It looks especially good over in Brisbane. But this swamp as well. The problem with this swamp is it's kind of a nasty, corrupted, toxified looking place too, which sort of drags the aesthetic down a little bit. I mean, it's hard enough to make a swamp look good, but if it looks really lush and flowery, I can totally see myself wanting to spend a lot of time there. I guess maybe if we had an event going, this might be a bit easier. I'm not sure at this point. Maybe you guys can contribute in the comments if there is an event that has these people at this particular heart getting attacked. We're not in a meta event area here, so this isn't like Dredgehaunt where there's a bunch of disconnected locations that all can flip and therefore it's a meta. These are just some hearts. But there you have it. That was the last one at the south of the map. Pretty efficient map completion. Many thanks to TechZoon, who looked like they had real trouble going back and forth between two characters on this one. Hope you guys give him your kudos. And I will see you for the next one. We're really getting towards the end here now, guys. Next time. Thanks for watching.